Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. I got off I-7 somewhere in rural Missouri around 11 at night. I'd been driving since dawn, determined to make it all the way to my sister's place in Kansas City, but my eyes were starting to close on their own. The smart thing would have been to stop hours earlier, but I kept telling myself, just one more exit. The roadside inn was about 400 meters from the highway, one of those single-story strip buildings wrapped around a parking lot. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, and it was missing a few letters. When I pulled into the lot, I saw 13 cars scattered around, which felt like a decent sign. Not empty, not packed. The guy at the front desk looked about 60. He was watching a small TV behind the counter. He barely glanced up when I walked in. "Need a room for tonight," I said. $72, cash or card. I handed him my card. He ran it through one of those old manual swipe machines, the kind I hadn't seen in years. While he processed the charge, I noticed the wall behind him, a pegboard with room keys hanging on hooks. Real metal keys, not cards. "Room 14, he said, sliding the key across the counter. End of the hall, left side. The room was exactly what I expected. Worn carpet with mysterious stains, a bedspread that had seen better decades, and a TV bolted to the dresser. But the sheets looked clean when I pulled them back, and the bathroom didn't smell like mildew. I've slept in worse places. I took a quick shower, checked my phone, barely 1 bar of service, and climbed into bed. The mattress was harder than I liked, but I was so tired I didn't care. I woke up to voices. My phone read 2:17 a.m. At first I thought they were coming from the TV, but the screen was off. Then I realized they were coming from the room next door, through the wall behind the headboard. A man and a woman arguing. The voices were muffled, but the anger was obvious. I couldn't make out words, just the tone. I've lived in apartments. Thin walls are nothing new. I put the pillow over my head and tried to ignore it. The argument got louder. Something slammed the wall hard enough that I felt it through the bed frame. And then the woman screamed. Not a typical fighting scream, but a scream of real, pure terror. I sat up fast, completely awake. My heart was pounding. Another crash. More screaming. And then it stopped. Total silence. I stayed still with my phone in my hand, trying to decide what to do. Call the front desk. Call the police. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they just stopped fighting. But that scream kept replaying in my head. I got up and pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. Not even a TV. No footsteps. No movement. I put on my jeans and shoes, grabbed my room key, and went outside. The parking lot was silent, lit by a single overhead light that painted everything yellow. Room 15, next to mine, had the curtains drawn. No light showed inside. I stood there for a second, feeling ridiculous. What was I supposed to do? Knock on the door and that's it? And then I noticed it. The door to 15 wasn't fully shut. It was open about an inch. The lock hadn't latched. I knocked softly. "Hey, you guys okay in there?" No answer. I knocked harder. "Hello?" Nothing. I pushed the door slowly. The room was dark except for the parking lot light spilling in from outside. I could see enough to tell the layout was identical to mine. Bed, dresser, bathroom door on the right. "Hello?" I said again, louder. I reached in and flipped the light switch. The room was empty. Not empty like I don't see anyone, but empty like no one had ever been there. The bed perfectly made. Surfaces cleared off. No luggage, no personal items, nothing. I stood there, confused. I had heard them. I had heard them clearly. The yelling, the fight, the slam against the wall. I checked the bathroom. Empty. I checked the closet. Nothing. And then I saw something on the carpet near the bed. Dark stains. Still wet. I crouched to look closer. careful not to touch anything. In the dim light, I couldn't tell what it was, but it looked like someone had tried to clean something and hadn't gotten it all. That's when I saw the maintenance door. Every room had one. I'd noticed it in mine earlier. A small panel in the wall, maybe 60 by 90 centimeters, so maintenance could access plumbing and electrical. The one in my room was screwed shut and covered in layers of old paint. But this one was cracked open. Just a little, 1 or 2 inches. I backed toward the main door. This was way above anything I could handle. I needed the front desk guy, or the police, or both. I was almost out when I heard it. A wet sound like dragging coming from inside the maintenance space, like something heavy being pulled across concrete. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't close the door. I sprinted straight to the office. The front desk guy looked annoyed when I burst in. "The room next door," I said out of breath. 15. Something's wrong. I heard a fight, screaming. And now there's something inside the maintenance space. He stared at me for a long moment. "Room 15 is empty. It's been empty for 3 days. "I heard people," I insisted. "A man and a woman fighting. The door was open and there's something on the carpet and the maintenance door." He raised a hand. "Let me call the sheriff." He picked up the phone, but I noticed he didn't seem particularly alarmed, like this wasn't the first time someone had reported something about room 15. The deputy arrived 20 minutes later. He was young, couldn't have been more than 25. I told him everything while the clerk stood there, expressionless. The 3 of us walked together to room 15. The door was still open, just like I'd left it. The deputy went in first, one hand near his belt by his gun. He checked the bathroom, the closet, then crouched where I'd seen the wet stains. "There's nothing here," he said. I saw something. Dark stains right there next to the bed. He shined his flashlight. The carpet was dry. What I'd seen was gone. Then he went to the maintenance door and opened it all the way. He shined the light inside, just pipes, wires, dust. Nothing else. The space was barely deep enough for a person to crawl into, and it didn't lead anywhere. Just a utility access. "Sometimes sound travels weird in these old buildings," the deputy said. "It could have come from another room, echoed through ducts or pipes. Happens more than you'd think." I wanted to argue, but what could I say? There was no proof of anything. They let me go back to my room, but I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed with the door locked and chained, the lights on until morning. I checked out at 6 a.m. Someone else was at the desk, an older woman who smiled and asked if I'd slept well. I just nodded and left. About 10 miles down the highway, I realized I'd left my phone charger plugged in next to the bed. I almost turned back, and then decided I'd rather buy a new one than go back to that place. 3 weeks later, I was scrolling the news on my phone when I saw a headline: "Human remains found in a Missouri motel during a renovation." My stomach dropped. The article said contractors remodeling the roadside inn near I-7 had found human remains hidden in the space behind the walls. The remains were old, at least a decade, possibly more. Police were investigating, trying to identify the victim. The article included a photo of the motel. I recognized it instantly. I thought about calling the sheriff's department to tell them what I'd heard. But what would I say? That I heard a fight that left no evidence in a room that was empty weeks before they found something that had been there for years. It wouldn't sound logical. It wouldn't make sense. And yet, I know what I heard. And I think about it every time I'm on the road looking for a place to sleep. Now I stay in chain hotels, the kind with electronic locks and security cameras, because sometimes the walls in old places remember things, and sometimes late at night, they repeat them for anyone willing to listen. Story 2. The conference ended at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I should have driven the full 6 hours straight back home. I should have. But my boss had scheduled an early meeting the next morning at the office, which meant I would have had to leave at 5 o'clock a.m. to make it on time. The numbers didn't add up. I needed to sleep somewhere. I tried 3 hotels near the convention center in Indianapolis, all booked. Some medical convention had taken every room within a 10-mile radius. The 4th place I called suggested I try a motel a little farther out, near a 465. The Starlight Motor Lodge was exactly the kind of place I normally avoided. 2 stories, exterior walkways, a parking lot that clearly needed new asphalt. But it was already almost 8 o'clock at night. I was exhausted and they had a room available. The woman at check-in was in her mid-40s, pretty friendly. She explained that the ice machine on the 2nd floor was broken, but the one on the 1st floor worked fine. Continental breakfast from 6 to 9. The Wi-Fi password was written on the key sleeve. Room 207, 2nd floor, halfway down the building. The room smelled like that industrial air freshener that tries to cover cigarette smoke. The carpet had that pattern meant to hide stains, and the bedspread had a few small burn holes near the edge. But it was just for one night. I ordered a pizza, ate half of it while watching cable news, and then took a shower. The water pressure was surprisingly good. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and climbed into bed around 10:30. The ice machine woke me up, not the sound of the machine running, but the sound of someone using it. The steady, constant clunk, clunk, clunk of ice falling into a bucket over and over. Way more ice than anyone would ever need. I checked my phone, 1:43 a.m. The sound kept going. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Then footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Then silence. I was almost back asleep when it started again. Clunk, clunk, clunk. More footsteps, this time heading the other way. And then again the same pattern. Ice machine, footsteps, silence. Ice machine, footsteps, silence. After the 4th time, I got up and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, lit by fluorescent lights that gave everything a greenish tint. I could see the ice machine about 9 meters away, next to the vending machines. I waited. Just like I expected, about 3 minutes later, a figure appeared. A man in a white t-shirt and jeans holding a bucket. He walked to the machine and filled it. I could hear the ice dropping, and then he passed my door heading toward the stairs at the end of the building. Fine, I thought. Just someone who really loves ice, or needs to keep drinks cold for a party. Annoying, but not my problem. Except he came back 5 minutes later. The same guy, bucket empty. He went to the machine, filled it again, walked past my door, and again, and again. By the 6th trip, I was irritated. Nobody needs that much ice. I opened my door when he was coming back toward the machine. "Hey, man," I said, trying to sound friendly despite how annoyed I was. "Everything okay? That's a lot of ice." He didn't respond. He didn't even look at me. He kept walking to the machine, filled the bucket, and walked right past me toward the stairs. I stood there in the doorway, confused. He'd passed so close I could have touched him, and he acted like I didn't exist. I watched him go down the stairs and waited to see if he came back up. 5 minutes later, he returned again, bucket empty. "Hey," I said louder this time. "Can you keep it down? People are trying to sleep." Nothing. He walked to the machine, filled the bucket, walked past me. I could hear his steps. I could hear the ice hitting inside the bucket, but he didn't acknowledge me at all. I went back inside and called the front desk. It rang 10 times before someone answered. "Yeah," a sleepy male voice said. "Hi, sorry to bother you, but there's a guy on the 2nd floor making a ton of noise with the ice machine. He's been at it for like half an hour nonstop." Silence on the other end. "Hello," I said. "The ice machine on the 2nd floor. It's broken. It's been broken for a week." "No, I'm hearing it right now. There's a man filling a bucket over and over." "Sir, that machine doesn't work. It's unplugged." "I'm looking at it right now through the peephole." I lied. "He's using it." Another pause. "What room are you in?" 207. "I'll go check." I waited by the door. The man with the bucket made 2 more trips while I stood there. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs at the far end. Heavier steps, a different rhythm. The night manager appeared, big guy in his 50s wearing a Colts t-shirt. He nodded at me and walked toward the ice machine. He stood there a moment, pulled out his phone, and used the flashlight to look at something. Then he came back to me. "The machine is unplugged," he said. "Has been for days. The compressor blew. But I saw someone using it. Nobody's used it since we unplugged it last Tuesday." "Then what's that noise?" We stood still, listening. The hallway was silent except for the buzz of the lights. "I don't hear anything," he said. But then I heard it. Footsteps coming up the stairs. The same rhythm as before. The man in the white t-shirt appeared at the top of the steps, bucket empty in his hand. He walked toward the ice machine. "That one," I said, pointing. "Right there." The manager looked where I was pointing. "I don't see anyone." The man walked right between us. I could see him perfectly clearly. Around 30, brown hair, a white t-shirt with some logo on it, worn jeans. He reached the ice machine, stretched his hand toward the dispenser, and his hand went straight through it. He mimed filling the bucket. I heard the ice falling perfectly, but nothing was actually falling. The bucket stayed empty. Then he turned and walked past us again, heading for the stairs. A cold wave ran through my whole body. "You seriously don't see him?" I asked. The manager's expression changed. Before he'd been annoyed. Now he looked uneasy. "Go back to your room," he said quietly. "Lock your door. I'll take care of this." "Take care of what? What is that?" "Inside, please." I did what he said. My hands were shaking as I locked the door. I stayed by the peephole. The manager stood in the hallway for a minute, then walked toward the ice machine. He did something I couldn't quite see, and then headed toward the stairs. The footsteps came back. I watched through the peephole as the man appeared again, walked to the machine, and repeated the motions of filling the bucket. I could still hear the ice, even though nothing was really happening. I stepped away from the door and sat on the edge of the bed. The sound continued. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Footsteps. Silence. Over and over. I tried putting on headphones and playing music, but I could still hear it underneath. I tried covering my head with pillows. Nothing worked. At some point, I must have fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion, because I woke up with sunlight coming through the curtains and my phone alarm ringing. I packed up quickly and went down to check out. The same woman from the night before was back at the desk, fresh and smiling. "How was your stay?" she asked. "Fine," I lied. "Hey, what's going on with the ice machine on the second floor?" Her smile flickered a little. "Oh, it's broken. It should be fixed next week." The guy last night said it's been broken for a while. "Yeah, about a week and a half." Has anyone else complained about noises from that machine, even though it's broken?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Sometimes people hear things in old buildings. The pipes, the air conditioning. Sounds travel in strange ways." "That's not what I asked." She handed me the receipt. "Have a safe trip back." I got to my car and sat there for a minute, debating whether I should just let it go. Then I pulled out my phone and searched Starlight Motor Lodge, Indianapolis. Most of the results were reviews, the usual complaints. Outdated rooms, thin walls, sketchy neighborhood. But I found something else. A news article from 8 years earlier. "Local man dies in motel accident." The article was short. A 32-year-old man staying at the Starlight Motor Lodge had been found dead inside the second-floor ice machine. The machine had malfunctioned while he reached in to clear a jam, and he'd been crushed. The article said he was getting ice for his sick wife, who was in their room with a fever. Police ruled it an accidental death. The motel had been cited for faulty equipment. I looked at the photo attached to the story. The victim's name was censored in the version I found online, but there was an image of the motel after the accident, with police tape stretched across the second floor. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at that article. Then I drove home, and I didn't stop until I got there. Story 3. I actually had no plan to be in Arizona. My flight from Denver to San Diego was canceled. Something about a mechanical issue, they said. and the airline couldn't get me on another flight until the next afternoon. They offered me a hotel voucher, but it was for one near the airport. One of those places I already knew would be ridiculously expensive. Instead, I rented a car and decided to make progress by road. The idea was to drive part of the trip, stop somewhere in Arizona to get a little sleep, and finish the drive in the morning. In fact, doing it that way saved me time compared to spending nearly 20 hours waiting at the airport. I made it to the outskirts of Phoenix when I started feeling truly tired. It was almost midnight and the highway was basically empty. I took an exit that promised gas and food, but I found only a small cluster of businesses. Most of them closed at that hour. The Desert Palms Motel had a green neon vacancy sign glowing out front. The building was U-shaped, wrapped around a parking lot, with a swimming pool in the center. The pool was lit up and glowed a vivid turquoise in the darkness. The night clerk was a young guy, probably just over 20, completely absorbed in his phone. He checked me in without much conversation, took my credit card, and handed me a key card. "The pool closes at 10, he said, "but honestly, I'm not very strict about it. Just try not to make noise if you go in." Room 118, ground floor, with a direct view of the pool. The room was better than I expected. Clean, modern, like it had been remodeled recently. I dropped my bag, changed into shorts and a t-shirt, and thought about the pool. I don't usually swim that late, but the desert heat still hung in the air and the water looked perfect. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and went out. The pool area was small, maybe about 20 by 40 feet, surrounded by a chain-link fence. A sign on the gate read, "Pool hours, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m." But the gate wasn't locked. Lounge chairs were arranged around the edge. I was completely alone. I set the towel on a chair and tested the water with my foot. The temperature was ideal. I got in and started swimming slowly back and forth, enjoying the silence. I was on my fourth lap when I noticed someone else had come out. It was a woman sitting on one of the lounge chairs near the deep end. She was wearing a dark swimsuit and her hair was wet, like she'd just gotten out of the water. I hadn't heard her come in. I stopped in the shallow end, treading water. "Hi," I said. "Nice night for a swim." She didn't respond. She just sat there, staring toward the pool. I felt uneasy, so I kept swimming. When I lifted my head to breathe at the end of the next lap, she was gone. I looked around. The gate hadn't made any sound, but she was definitely not there anymore. I figured maybe she'd gone back to her room. I swam a couple more laps and decided to finish up. I got out and grabbed my towel. That's when I noticed the wet footprints. They led from the pool to one of the lounge chairs, exactly the one she'd been sitting on, and then stopped. They didn't continue toward the gate or anywhere else. They just ended at the chair. I stood there dripping, staring at those footprints. The dry desert air was already evaporating them, but they had definitely been there. I wrapped the towel around my shoulders and started back toward my room. When I looked back at the pool again, I saw her. Same chair, same posture, sitting facing the water. I froze. She hadn't moved. She hadn't changed position. She was completely still. "Hey," I called. "Are you okay?" No response. I walked back toward the gate. "Ma'am." She stood up slowly and walked to the edge of the pool. Then, without hesitation, she took a step forward and went into the water. She didn't jump. She didn't dive. She simply walked like she was stepping down invisible stairs. She sank straight down and never came back up. I ran to the gate. "Hey, hey!" The water was still. No ripples, no bubbles, nothing. I yanked the gate open and jumped into the pool without thinking, still wearing the towel. I dove right where I'd seen her disappear. The underwater lights were on so I could see clearly. The water was about 8 feet deep at that end. There was no one. I surfaced gasping and looked around frantically. Nothing. The pool was completely empty. Just me in it. I climbed out and ran to the office, leaving a trail of wet footprints across the concrete. The clerk looked up, startled, when I came in soaked, water dripping everywhere. "There's someone in the pool," I said out of breath. "A woman?" "She went under and didn't come back up." He stood up immediately. What? The pool. She walked in and went straight to the bottom. We need to call 911. He grabbed his phone and came back with me to the pool. We stood at the edge staring into the lit water, completely empty. I saw her, I insisted. She was sitting right there. Then she walked straight into the water. The guy looked around the pool area, then looked at me. Have you been drinking? No, I'm completely sober. She was wearing a dark swimsuit. Her hair was wet. She walked right there. I pointed to the exact spot. He walked around the pool, checking the area. Then he crouched down and touched the ground. These are your footprints, he said. They're the only wet ones here besides the puddles you just made now. I looked down. He was right. Only my footprints were there, both from when I'd gotten out earlier, and the new ones. She was here, I insisted. I saw her sitting in that chair. Then she stood up and walked into the water. The clerk pulled out his phone and opened an app. This is the security camera. He showed me the screen. The black and white video showed the pool area. I saw myself swimming, getting out, standing there with the towel and then running toward the office. There was no one else in the frame. Just me, completely alone. I don't understand, I said. I saw her as clearly as I'm seeing you right now. He closed the app and looked at me for a long moment. Then he sighed. How many hours have you been awake? I don't know. Since 6 in the morning, I guess. Almost 20 hours. You're exhausted, he said. The mind plays tricks when you're tired, especially in unfamiliar places. I know what I saw. Listen, he said quietly. Go back to your room. Get some sleep. In the morning, everything will make more sense. I wanted to argue, but what could I say? The video showed I was alone. There were no wet footprints except mine. There was no proof that anyone else had been there. I went back to my room and stayed in the shower a long time trying to warm up. Even though it wasn't cold, when I finally got into bed, I left the TV on just to have background noise. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her walking into the water. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up and opened my laptop. I searched Desert Palms Motel Phoenix and started reading reviews. Most were normal, cheap, clean, good location. But I found one from 6 months earlier. Nice place, but the pool is weird at night. I saw someone swimming after midnight, and when I went out to look, there was nobody there. Probably just travel exhaustion, but it freaked me out. Another one from 4 months earlier. Don't use the pool at night. It sounds strange, but trust me. I kept digging and found an old article from 15 years ago. A woman had drowned in the motel pool. She'd been drinking, went for a swim alone late at night, and never came back up. Her body was found by housekeeping the next morning. The article included a photo of the motel, the same U-shape, the same pool. It also had an image of the victim, a woman with dark hair, probably in her 30s. I stared at that photo for a long time. I couldn't be completely sure. I'd only seen her from a distance and in the dark, but the hair was the same. The build, too. I closed the laptop and lay back again. An infomercial was playing on the TV. Something about kitchen knives. I let it run without paying attention, just to fill the silence. When the sun finally came up, I packed my things and went to check out. The day clerk was an older woman who smiled and asked if I'd slept well. Fine, I said. Hey, can I ask you something? Has anyone else reported seeing things near the pool at night? Her smile didn't change. We have excellent reviews for cleanliness and customer service. Was there any problem with your room? No, just... never mind. Forget it. She handed me the receipt. We hope you'll stay with us again if you're back in the area. I drove straight to San Diego. I didn't stop except for gas. I made it in a little over 5 hours. I've passed through Phoenix a few times since then for work. I always take the same exit, more out of habit than anything else. And every time I see that green Desert Palms Motel vacancy sign, the pool is still there, lit up at night, glowing turquoise in the darkness. I've never stopped there again.